So, Gamers Without Joysticks is a all-female community. We started off with 10 members, and now we have over 57 to be exact. In that group, we talk about what we love, what we hate, the struggles that we go through as women, and being gamers as well. So we have here today Sylvia. She is a gamer, and she was also an assistant manager for a multi-billion-dollar gaming third-party retailer that's internationally known. So she's pretty amazing. We also have Cristina Gonzalez, and she is also an avid gamer, and she is also a writer. And my name is Jessica. I work for Microsoft, and I personally specialize in gaming events, the marketing, advertisement, and specialize mostly in Xbox. But I used to also work with Sylvia, so I was also part of the gaming industry as well. We are here today to talk about women in the gaming industry. We are going to also be talking about why they're important and why women are actually extremely needed in the industry in and of itself, regarding jobs, development, so on and so forth. We'll also talk about some of the problems in the industry, share personal experiences and advice, and end with some Q&A, which is why you guys have those blank note cards. So I want to first start with why it's important for us to have this panel. Gaming, no matter if it is PC, console, mobile, tabletop, any reason at all, anything that has to do with gaming, we've all become a really huge part of it. We also fell in love with the idea of creating other universes, characters. We grew through some characters. Some people use gaming as an escape, others use it for entertainment, and some use it to almost show a side of themselves that they wouldn't be able to show in real life. So it also has brought you every range of emotion. So it's also brought cathartic release. It's helped us develop as people over time. So women are becoming more and more, they're becoming more prominent in the industry and in the demographic. So in 2012, we actually increased by 6%. So we are now at 48% of the demographic. 58% of Americans are actually gamers. So the fact that we represent almost the majority of that can definitely say a lot. So with the demographic increasing, there's 3 myths that I definitely want to debunk today, because I'm pretty sure all female gamers can speak and agree with me when I talk about them. The first one is that women don't like action games. That is a lie. So a recent survey actually showed that almost 25 to 30% of the consumers for titles like Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto were actually women. There's also the myth that there aren't any female gamers, and of course, since we are all here today, that is obviously a lie. And Nintendo actually recently released that 50% of its demographic is females. And finally, well, not finally, but second to last, we have the whole, oh, you're a gamer girl? I hate that. Gamer girls don't actually exist, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit later. But the most important one that I do want to talk about, which is why we actually are here today, is that the industry doesn't want women, and that's not true. A recent HR specialist from EA had admitted that we actually need women in the industry, most importantly engineers. So she said that with the gaming industry, we always have to be innovative. We also have to always change. And we also have to have a lot of diversity. So with women, and also POC and disabled, we can actually do that. Let me see here. Oh, another kind of concern when it comes to the gaming industry is that there aren't any jobs available. And it's actually not true. As of this moment, check back I believe yesterday or the day before, there are actually over 12 jobs that are hiring for the industry themselves. We've got art and animation, graphic artist, program director of engineering, technical art manager, visual/interaction designer, game level designer, creative director, embedded software engineer, senior animator, corporate gaming associate, the gaming ecosystem, marketing manager, and then of course you have your normal Q&A testing.
And I think it's important to stress that it's not 12 jobs total. These are career fields
Exactly.
that are looking for up and coming new employees to fill these positions and to jump on these career paths.
Yes, and actually branching off from that, thank you. We also have your everyday jobs, the ones that no one really talks about, no one really appreciates. Accounting, customer service, sales, retail, even teaching. And those are hiring too. Of course, they may be with third-party retailers, but they're hiring nonetheless. So if you love gaming, you don't need to have a degree in computer science or engineering or graphic design in order to be a part of that industry.
So you're probably asking yourself, what does it take to actually get into the industry, for at least from an educational standpoint? But according to the IDGA, which is the International Development Games Association, only 35% had an actual specialized degree that was somewhat relevant to their field, and 32% had something directly related to their field, while the rest of them were just supplemental training and stuff like that through college courses or high school, but no other equivalent education background. But there's some still good news for people that are still in school. 11% of the industry is comprised of students, and of that 11%, 35% are actually women. There's also a high demand for entry-level jobs, so just because you don't think that you're experienced enough to do it, doesn't mean that you can't get in if you're not qualified. Another good news is that half of them haven't been laid off in the past 2 years. But the bad side of it is that 70% of the people in the game industry have been laid off permanently, which means that there's a high turnover rate and a larger risk for job instability. A large percentage of those employees actually had to go ahead and relocate. Majority of the people in the gaming industry are full-time, while only 10% were part-time. Even students did part-time and full-time. And regarding reality versus fantasy gaming, when you go ahead and think of the gaming industry, you think, oh wow, it must be so amazing. Well, there's still a lot of things that are really different. About 70% is full-time, but because of the constant change in development and company and other disrupting influences, some surveyors said that they prefer temporary work or contract work than actually working with a first or second party developer. And that's why you've probably seen a lot of surgence of indie developers in the past few years. But you're probably, why do they want to go ahead and do that? But because they wanted more control over their own hours, more control over work, create their own projects, and have control over employment security. Another indie dev to go ahead and just throw out there was Robin Koenig. She's a producer of Journey, so she was part of that game company, but then she branched off and made her own, which is Phenomenon, which I learned how to pronounce today. Another thing is quality of life. Game developers and designers and engineers, they're all artists. And if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. But the truth is that being an artist is really hard. And there's a lot of reasons that they go ahead and quit is either because they have a poor quality of life or they just got burned out. And the reason they get burned out so much is because they have this thing called crunch time, where they go ahead and work endless amount of hours to go ahead and meet development standards by a certain time. 17% said they hadn't really had a crunch time in the past 2 years, while 45% had experienced crunch periods, 2 crunch periods in 2 years, and half of those people expected it to happen. So that's a lot of pressure on just one person to go ahead and meet those deadlines all the time. Reasons for crunch time are unrealistic or poor scheduling, unclear expectations, insufficient staffing, and inexperienced management. With over the 47% of the workforce said they were compensated fairly, for the amount of experience they had, because remember, not a lot of them had a lot of background in game development, and with the top job title they had. But not all of it was monetary, so sometimes they were just getting extra time off, but it didn't mean that they were getting paid more. So we spent a lot of time away from home. The good news is that 52% said that they enjoyed the relationship between management and employees. So it's either good or excellent, which is pretty good. When they asked what was the biggest thing in the gaming industry that needed to grow, the number one thing was advancement in game design. Other ones were diversity of game content, plot advancements, and funding for game developers.
All right, so we've pretty much given you a lot of statistics to work with, so please bear with us. So I'm sure the biggest question that kind of arises is, what does this have to do with us? In the end, there is actually more than one thing that has to change within the industry. One of them is better woman representation, but the other is the lack of POC representation. And we aren't the only ones who feel this way. Over 67% of surveyors said that sexism in games influenced their negative perception of the industry. That's obviously over half. And then another 51% said that there was sexism in the actual workforce. 42% said that they lacked diversity. And kind of going within that, over 79% of surveyors said that the diversity was important to the industry. Oh yes, and 74% was in the workplace altogether. And men, who make up for 76% of the gaming industry, and women are 22%, and then we also have transgender, which is the remaining 2%. Three other factors that were also stated, like workforce conditions, links to violence, and obesity, but we're going to kind of focus more on the first and the third. So the good news is that over 62% of the industry said that they didn't feel any discrimination. So we are making progress. We do have a little bit more than over half saying that equality is within the workforce, so don't feel intimidated. Don't feel like you're going to be constantly harassed at work. However, there were also multiple smaller percentage of groups that said that there were still a lot of issues that did need to be dealt with. One of those was, of course, sexism, microaggression. There was also miscommunication and negative communication between one another in the workforce. And of course, the last one was the monetary and salary bonuses, and of course the hiring process. So with the majority of the comments pertaining to the increasing high number of discrimination against self and others, we have some of the comments were that they felt that their male colleagues had a lot more privilege over themselves personally. They also had a huge concern for actual female representation in games. So while they had tried to discuss it, they weren't really taken seriously. So that's another thing that really does have to change in the industry. There was also a large percentage of women who said that they felt that they weren't respected, and they felt like they weren't being listened to. So kind of going a little bit more in depth with that, one of the biggest problems that we do have in the industry is the whole frat boy and the dude bro. That is actually really common in the gaming industry. So there's also a lot of sexual harassment, verbal harassment, and there was also the biggest issue, which I found personally offensive, was that male coworkers would actually invite females and said that there was a meeting when actually it was to get them on a date. So they're actually lying to them now. But this isn't really about how all men are bad. There was a percentage of men who did say that they felt that their female colleagues had gotten more special treatment, and they were a little bit biased because they were female. However, kind of overruling that, a large percentage of males did say that they agreed with women when they felt that they did have privilege. They were biased, or they did have special treatment. And whenever women would try and talk about these issues, whether it was sexual harassment, verbal harassment, they would either be reprimanded and also leading up to termination. So, let's see here. Yes, so for my men in the room who are feminists, who do identify as a feminist and think that the industry does need to change, one way that you can definitely help is by calling out those who will not listen to women. So pretty much being the example, setting the bar. Calling out closed-mindedness, sexism, and standing up for what is right within the industry in and of itself.
So the other issue that we're dealing with here in terms of looking at discrimination in the industry is discrimination on race. It's 2015, but unfortunately, in some offices, we're still stuck in the 1960s. A lot of people who transfer to foreign companies where they are the outsider feel that the companies that they work for treat them differently, maybe pass them over for promotions, simply because they're in the minority in terms of the racial makeup of the company. You also have an issue with language. For example, in Canada, you have maybe a bias towards French-speaking employees versus people who speak only English. Or in a company that is predominantly English-speaking, discrimination against those who speak Spanish or Japanese or that sort of, they do not fit the norm. They feel at a disadvantage because they're being singled out, they're being passed over, and then, and that's once you're hired. Just to get hired sometimes, you have to, Americanize your name so that they'll even look at your resume. There was an article. It was an article when we talked about it, where a man with a Hispanic-sounding name said they did 2 copies of his resume. One had his real name, which was a very Hispanic name, and the other was a very Americanized version. Both of these resumes were identical in terms of skills, education. Almost every time the employers picked the resume with the American sounding name. So that's something you still need to work towards. Then we're looking as well, on top of that, you've got potential employees with physical disabilities, consumers who have not just physical disabilities, but also emotional, mental disabilities. We're gamers too. And, we buy in, we use these games to escape, maybe the confines of our wheelchair or to feel normal. But in the real world, we do pretty much everything able-bodied people do. We come to conventions, we play sports, we go to school, we fall in love. So why is it that we seem to accept these fantastic worlds where magic is real and, you can get cybernetic implants at the corner store or, you can go to space. But we buy more readily into that than a video game where the main character is an amputee, or is deaf, or is blind. it's less a case of flooding the market with characters that are disabled, and more about presenting fully realized characters who just happen to have a disability, who just happen to deal with anxiety, who just happen to, you know, be missing a hand, or that they can't move inside of their body. A good example of a fully realized character with a disability is Joker from the Mass Effect trilogy. Joker has Frolic syndrome, which is brittle bones disease. Despite that, he is the best pilot in the Alliance fleet. He doesn't feel sorry for himself. He isn't used as an inspirational tool of like, wow, he can fly a ship, even though like he risks breaking his fingers every day. So amazing. He isn't killed off to give the main character angst. He's a very integral part of the adventure, and he even gets to fall in love, which I consider is really cute. But he is one of the few fully realized characters that I ever encountered as a player with a physical disability, and it's a very important thing that we need to do to bring awareness, to, you know, bring these characters that people like me can see and say, yeah, I get it, and I feel included, because that's me, like, that's me on the screen. So we need to work towards that as consumers, demanding to see these things, and in the industry, providing these things for our fans.
I definitely agree. I also want to point out that that also plays another part. Another thing we should definitely kind of recognize is female characters that are used either to assist with the character development of the main character, or simply having very cookie cutter personalities. So when it comes to women, the majority of what happens, especially when we see it on the media or gaming or even like movies, shows, doesn't matter. One thing that you definitely notice is that they're always kind of perfect in some way. A little bit more in-depthly. Is anybody here a fan of Doctor Who at all? Yes, no, maybe so, raise your hand. Everybody? No? Okay. So there's this character called Clara Oswald. And I really like to use her as, see, she knows. She knows. She knows. Clara Oswald is one of the examples I'm talking about. Because in Doctor Who, you know, she's the Time Lord's assistant, and, you know, he finds her, he rescues her, et cetera. But more importantly, she is a lot of contradicting personality traits that always seem to be, like, perfect, like, just right, but see, she knows, just right for the episode. So maybe she's feisty, but she's always feisty at the right time. Or maybe she is really bold, and she, you know, puts the Doctor in his place in the right time. We see a lot of these, and they're really subtle, because, you know, people think that if we have personalities with women on TV that are more than just 3 archetypes, that we're going to be satisfied. But to be quite frank, you know, women mess up too. I know I'm pretty brash at work. I've actually got a nickname, and I always verbally mess up sometimes. Well, all the time, actually. She knows. Sylvia. Yeah, Sylvia knows. I mean, another thing that also happens within the gaming industry in and of itself is not only do we have these kind of characters, but we also have the characters that are, like I said, assisting with the main development of the main character. So maybe she dies off and it's super tragic, and then like because she dies, the main character suddenly gets like this renowned like strength to go on because he has to like avenge her.
It's almost like the Last of Us.
Yes, You kind of spoiled it for me, but yes. Yes. Yeah, now everybody knows. Thanks a lot, guy.
She's the prologue. It's the prologue. You're not
Let's see.
We'll censor that out of the video.
Okay.
You know, along with that, Sylvia, do you have any characters in mind that also kind of bring, that are an example of that cookie cutter or the contradicting personalities?
Well, I wouldn't say that they're like the cookie cutter, the stereotypes. Like I go ahead and mainly play like a lot of RPGs, and of course there's
Oh my god, yeah.
So when you go ahead and play RPGs, there's always going to be like, sometimes they're like the harem, they have like the really quirky one, really silent one. And sometimes they'll go ahead and change it up. Like I recently went and played Danganronpa, and my favorite character of it was Sakura, who was the very lovely name, and you go ahead and be the very petite woman. She's actually a very burly, muscular man type of woman, and she was the best. But I completely agree when you go ahead and say that there's just way too many of them, especially in my JRPGs that I go ahead and play.
Right, and but the good news with that, so we do have these problems, but the good news is that there are also a lot of amazing games that do have female leads that are actually the main part. You don't see anybody doing the usual cookie cutter, you know, they mess up, and I think I personally feel like a really, really good one is Beyond Two Souls. So if anybody, man, you're like my favorite person. You were just like on point. You were with me every step of the way. We should have. We just throw it to you. So if anybody has played Beyond Two Souls, they know that of course we have Ellen Page as the lead, and you see her kind of progress. She does have a male character that kind of helps influence it too. But you see her grow. You see her make mistakes. You see her become somebody that is a great leader. Not really a leader, but she knows what it means to grow up. You see a lot of angst in her too whenever it shows a piece of her life as she's growing and figuring out some of her supernatural, I guess supernatural abilities, but that's really hard to explain. I'm gonna talk the whole panel through if I try and explain this plot. Another really good example is, Cortana. So there is a mixed opinion about Cortana. A lot of people think that, Cortana from Halo, not Cortana from Microsoft.
Not the phone app.
Not the phone. It's not an app. Okay.
Not the phone.
Not the
thing. I'm sorry, I'm an Android user, so.
Okay, they always like to make fun of me. And Cortana, by herself, yes, she does assist through Master Chief's development. But if you notice, throughout the later series, she actually gets her own personality a little bit. You start to see her. Wait, who hasn't played Halo 4? Okay. You don't care? Okay. So you see her start to lose herself because in the universe, the AI, the specific AI that she is, she only lasts for 7 years, or 6 years, I believe.
7.
And
It was 7.
Is it 7? Okay. And it's getting to that time where she's starting to die down, and you see her make sacrifices. You see her have outbursts. You see her really show that she's not the one who needs Chief. Master Chief needs her more than anything, especially near the end, which is why we have Halo 5 now. But more importantly, when we talk about women, you know, there's also really important women who are more than just the characters themselves, but we actually have developers and really awesome directors who, believe it or not, I bet you when she starts reading it, everyone's going to be super surprised, because when I read it, I actually had to like stop for a second and like be like, wow, that really blew my mind. All my favorite games, now I know why. So, go ahead, Sylvia.
Okay. So when we initially started this, or talking about the panel, we went and said that one of the myths was that there was a gamer girl, and there really isn't. And the reason is because it's really simple. Because you don't have to go ahead and say that you're a girl gamer. You don't say that's a guy gamer. You just say that they're a gamer. But if it's a girl, you have to say it's a girl gamer. It's not necessary to go ahead and put, it doesn't matter if we're a woman or a girl. If you play games, you are a gamer, regardless of gender or what device you go ahead and play it on. We've come a long way in the gaming industry, and just to name a few women that I've already been through, broke through the barriers, there's Kiki Wolfkill. She's the executive producer of Halo. She also worked on Project Gotham, Mass Effect, Gears of War, Forza. There's Amy Henning, creative director of so many hits like the Uncharted series and Jack and Dexter. There's Aya Kogoku, co-director of Animal Crossing, and that's why she also helped create peaceful gender diversity within the development team. She's also a writer of Zelda, The Twilight Princess, and Four Swords, which is nothing. Loves her.
Yeah, she did. I know, it's crazy.
There's Corinne Wu. She works for Naughty Dog. She helped modify the Unreal Engine. That's how Borderlands became possible. Kim Swift, one of the minds behind Miraculous Drop, which is also now known as Portal. And from working with Portal, now she also helped with Left 4 Dead 1 and 2. Tamara Miller, she's one of the creators of League of Legends. Laura Fryer, she's one of the founding members of the Xbox project. She also helped ship Gears 1 and 2. And then there's Susan O'Connor, who helped write the scripts for like Bioshock, Far Cry, and Tomb Raider. Which, when I go ahead and name all these women, you go, or when I name the women with these games, you go and think like these are real bro games that are generally geared towards men. But women had a lot of hand helping develop those games.
I mean, consider Bioshock, which pretty much revolutionized, well, brought back the first-person shooter, and is responsible probably for the whole trend of having multiple endings. I mean, Bioshock. I could run a whole panel about myself on Bioshock, but that's not what we're here for.
A slave.
Yes. But that's a different panel. Let's continue this one.
But when they were going ahead and talking about women that kind of like changed that cookie cutter persona, one that came to my mind is Zelda. When she initially went and came into the whole scene, she was the damsel in distress. You know, Link goes to go and save Zelda and stuff like that.
We're still working on Mario.
We're still working on Mario.
Well, there was Super Mario RPG.
What's up?
Exactly, that's what I was gonna say. Like, I don't know if you played Smash Bros recently or Hyrule Warriors recently, but when she's not like a pseudo ninja, you know, hiding for several years, learning stealth and combat, she dons her battle armor, her rapier, and she just goes to town on them. Okay, like I don't throw down.
Zelda throws down.
Even in, well, I'm pretty sure no one can get school for Ocarina of Time, but in Ocarina of Time, she was basically
Yeah, she was.
Yeah.
And like, I completely agree with like that new article that came out. I don't know why people went and thought that Sheik was a man. It was obviously Zelda in a costume.
Okay, some of us
something that like when she is she it could be like a gender fluid thing.
I guess that's.
That is very true. You know, I'm a little bit embarrassed to say this. I can't believe I'm going to admit it, but there was also.
I don't even know what you're gonna say. I'm rolling my eyes.
There is also, within that 2%, jumping back a few subjects, I apologize. Within the 2% of the transgender, we also.
What was the other name?
It's not another word. It's like
That
the
was
dash,
associated.
and then it was andro.
androgynous.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry. Like I didn't know. See? Yes, but that was actually also a big part too. Well, it was the 2%, but they were still part of the gaming industry in and of themselves. So after Sylvia got done talking about all of these amazing women who did help with the creation of this fantastic exclusive, some are cross-platform, but mostly exclusive, I'm sure we were all at least slightly surprised. If not, if you were ahead of the game with that, like I give you major kudos because like I've been part of the gaming industry for a long time and I never knew that. So kudos to anybody who knew those women before I did. But I really want to point out on a serious note within that is that these women didn't get there without struggles. They didn't get there without challenges, without actually pretty much shoving it in everybody's faces that they have the capability of making such fantastic titles. I know that maybe once or twice whether it's in the gaming industry or even outside, as women, we've always kind of doubted ourselves just a little bit. We've always kind of said, well, I probably don't have a chance, or I may not have a chance because I know so-and-so who's male will probably be preferred. And the truth is that even if that was the case, you don't have to feel like you are limited. Because the only person who fails by not trying is you. So even if you get rejected, you can still kind of say, you know what, I did it. And I know that I can work harder, and I know that I can be better. And that's the main point. So you can make a difference. Women, men, it doesn't matter. We can change the industry. Within that, we also have a piece of advice. So we went around and we kind of talked to our group a little bit, and we asked for advice on what they would be able to give to you because they were successful. And there was one that really stood out to me, and I want to give a special shout out. I don't know if she's here today, she might be really busy. But her name is Pat, and she was actually responsible for all of our design because she is, I believe she is a graphic. She's doing
game
graphic
design.
Yeah, she's doing design.
She's doing game design, but she's always done art stuff. So.
Right. She's always been an artist, but she loves gaming, and she's going to integrate both. And she sent me her story, and I wish we had the time to really go more in depth about what she had went through, but she went through a lot of struggles. Right, that's a good question. And the piece of advice that I want to take from her story is that, I quote, she said, "Learn to be who you want to be and don't let people discourage you. I know that's hard, and it took me a long time to stand up for myself. But when I finally did, I found real happiness. Even when I'm working 15-hour days and having nightmares about what's left to be done and waking up exhausted, you know what? I'm happy. My advice, other than being who you are, find friends in the field you want to get into. If nothing else, it gives you someone who understands what you're going through. No job is too small, but get paid up front." So sassy. Even if you're passionate about the project, you can't survive without money, which is very true. I don't know, can you?
Even ramen isn't free, sadly.
Unfortunately,
For a moment, I thought she said rum.
That's not free either.
Unfortunately.
She also continues with, and be the best that you can be. There will be doubters, whether you're female or not, and it could be your age or your experience with a certain type of degree or school, and don't let them discourage you. Keep trying. Keep growing and expanding your skills and your viewpoints, and you will do jobs you don't love. It happens to everyone because we need to eat. Just never give up on looking and trying for the job that you really want. And her sister actually gave a piece of advice too. She also sent me her story. She actually works for Disney. If anybody is curious, happy with that. But she was a little bit more fortunate. But the piece of advice that I want to give from her story is that the reason why she got to where she was because she had a great mentor and she had a great leader. And I think we've all been in a situation where we really looked up to somebody and we wanted to kind of take after them, and we always want to take the opportunities that they give. And that's basically her piece of advice, is if you have the opportunity, seize it. Especially if someone like a leader or a mentor is offering it to you, because then you can also grow while getting the experience that you need, and that's in any situation. And then we also have Sylvia, who's also going to give an awesome piece of advice.
It's on the day. Oh, you're just asking me right now. I did work for the gaming industry for several years, and even though I loved the people that I worked with, I didn't feel all that fulfilled with my job. So I did quit, and I went back to school full time. Gaming's still really part of my life, but I wanted to go ahead and tell you, if you don't enjoy what you do, but you still enjoy games, just find another route, because nothing should go ahead and stop you to keep doing what you love.
Well, I'm mostly a consumer of games, but I've had to give limits all of my life. And you just learn to be resourceful. When something doesn't work for you, if there's a wall, find a way to climb it. If there's, you know, a river, find a way to cross it. There's always more than one way to do something. And sometimes that requires looking at it in ways that nobody else would. But when you find that angle, the reward is just so worth it. It's just, I can't even describe. I can't describe how great it is when you finally find that way in and, you know, you reach that goal that you've been struggling for. And also, make portfolios, because you never know when that job opening is going to hit, and you just got to be ready. You got to always be ready. Always ready. So, that's my advice.
Okay. And last but not least, there is a piece of advice from me. And I want to start with it by saying that from personal experience, even when you get the job, even when you have surpassed every expectation and every standard and you've raised the bar several times, there's always going to be more challenges. And it's not a road that is going to be easy. One of the examples is when I had applied for Microsoft, it was actually on a whim. And I want to point out that I have no degree experience. I have no degrees that made me qualified to work with Microsoft. The only thing I had was experience within the own gaming industry. Whenever I went to my interview, there were 40 people that were all being interviewed at the same time. 40. And there were 200 applicants before that who had applied for the same exact opening that I did, the only position that was open. And they all had degrees, marketing degrees, computer science degrees, sales, even management as well. And so when I had come in, the only main thing that I could push was my numbers. Top seller, got my employees promoted to management positions, et cetera, et cetera. So by the time that I had sat down and I had my future store manager look at me and he said, oh, by the way, there were only 2 women in that entire 40 group, 40 people. And that was me and Sylvia. Yeah, that's including me. They sat me down and they said, they looked at my resume. They were pretty quiet. They asked me a few questions, and then at the end of it, they said, out of the 200 applicants who applied for this position, and out of the 40 applicants here, why should we choose you? And it took me a second because I realized that I had put away all of my cards. There was nothing else that I could wow them with, and so I had to take a chance. And I said, I'm a guaranteed success. So I got the position, and I thought that that would be it, and that wasn't. After I had gotten it, I essentially got no training that all the other employees did, so I was pretty much thrown to the wolves. And even then, I realized that I had 2 options. I could prove to my managers that I was not worth it, or I could take the challenge and become the best. So, with that being said, I made top 3. And that's not the end of it. So I won't continue with my progress, but I will say that for those who love something that they do, and if they're really good at it, don't ever think that just because it's easy, it means you're going the right route. It means that you're not pushing yourself. And there's always going to be challenges that you need to overcome, because that's the only way you're going to grow as a person and as an employee and get where you want to go. So, with that being said, we do have 4 minutes left before we do questions. Did you want to talk about the resources?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to go ahead and briefly mention. There's a few programming sites that you can go ahead and download for free. like Game Maker, Unity, Unreal Engine 3, Pygame. They're all free software that you can download to your computer that are available to anybody. To help you with design and programming.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome too.
Game Maker is some of the most successful in modern RPGs, I think RPG Maker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Only
all of the RPG Maker.
That's a scary game. I don't
it's a sad game.
I'm not. But that being said, you also, unfortunately, when we did our research, the colleges that were available, they were limited.
Yeah.
I think there was only 2 or 3.
There was only a handful. The closest one that I could go ahead and see that actually offered programming degrees here in San Antonio was Northwest Vista. And then the next closest one, if you want to go and get something higher than an associate's, was University of Houston, Victoria, which is still a little further.
Yes. Another thing that I want to point out, and I'm not saying this because I work for Microsoft, but it is something I found really cool. But we actually have camps that they're kind of like day camps, and they actually teach you everything that you need to know regarding Windows. Not like a tutorial or anything like programming. They also have gaming, software design. They have a lot of really in-depth lectures, I would say. Not even lectures. Yeah, workshops. Thank you. They have really in-depth workshops that are from certified techs, certified programmers. So you will get a leg up. With that being said, if you are interested in kind of getting these websites, especially if you're into your designing and programming, you can always come to us afterwards, or you can also join our group, which will also have the links available. So with that being said, does anybody have any questions?